All right. Today's reading will be from St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, chapter 5, verse 33, and also chapter 6, verses 1 through 9. This will be with the explanation according to the Blessed Theophylact, who is an archbishop from the Ohrid region of Bulgaria from the 11th century. Buckle up. This is a good but very long reading. Brethren, nevertheless, let every one of you in particular so love his wife even as himself, and the wife see that she reverence her husband. That's verse 33. And the explanation here? Even though I have interpreted allegorically and in a spiritual sense the prophetic words quoted above of Adam and Moses as applying to Christ and the church, nevertheless, they also refer in a literal sense to the husband and wife. For this spiritual allegory does not overrule the literal union in the flesh, which takes place between husband and wife. Every husband should love and cherish his wife as he would love and cherish himself. And you, the husband, must never say, "My wife has this or that fault, so I do not want her." You yourself have faults and blemishes in your own body, a deformed hand, perhaps, or a crippled foot, or a lazy eye, but you would not even think of cutting off these members from your own body. Rather, you would make a greater effort to heal them. Likewise, if your wife has any weakness or blemish, you must not separate yourself from her on that account, but rather be even more attentive to get healing for her. Equality in everything between husband and wife creates instability in marriage and in running of the household. Therefore, Paul instructs the wife to have reverence for her husband, so that by means of her reverence for him, there might be a single authority. The wife should have respect for her husband, not a slavish submission, but a reverence befitting those who are free, which is none other than the respect, modesty, and discretion which she has towards him. Only from this kind of reverence can love be established, and love reinforces reverence. The wife should love her husband, being a constituent part of him, and she should honor him as her head, as God himself commanded Eve at the beginning of the world, saying, "And thy submission shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee," in Genesis 3:17. But a husband might ask, "What shall I do if my wife is not reverent and deferential to me?" Then you, the husband, must show her much love and persuade her to reverence you. And likewise, you, the wife, if you do not love your husband as you should, then at least fulfill your duty and show respect to him. And by this reverence and modesty, you will, in the end, persuade your husband to love you. Do you see, O reader, that the apostle has spoken at great length to demonstrate that the husband should love his wife? In a single paragraph, he has explained that the wife should revere her husband, and that in marriage love should be more prevalent than fear. The wife, as we have explained, ought to have reverence for her husband because she is united to him by love. But it should not be the kind of reverence that frightens her and makes her tremble. That kind of reverence does not lead to love and unity, but rather to hatred and discord. In addition, the wife should have the kind of reverence that restrains her from talking back to her husband, rebelling against him, or striving to have the upper hand in the household. For although the wife is one flesh with her husband and shares an equal authority with her husband over the children that are born, nevertheless, her authority is secondary to that of her husband, who has the primary and greater authority. All right. Chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment, with a promise. The last word of verse 2 in the King James text has been changed from promises, the plural, to a promise, which is singular. We have done so citing the authority of the New Testament in the original Greek according to the Byzantine majority text form. Interesting. All right, and the explanation: a sculptor, when he fashions a likeness of a human being, first forms the head, and then the neck, the shoulders, hands, and then feet. In a similar manner, Paul acts as the architect of the church of God. First, he describes the husband as the head of the marriage. Then he portrays the wife as the second authority of the marriage. Finally, he turns to the children, who have the authority over the servants who constitute the feet of the household. The husband is the sole authority of the wife, and the husband and wife together have authority over the children, and the children, as they grow older, as the inheritors of the parents, have authority over the servants. The apostle commands that the children be obedient to their parents, but to do so in the Lord, namely, when the directives of the parents are in accordance with the law of the Lord. For if the parents should urge their children towards impiety and unbelief, or force their daughter into harlotry, or their son into sinful professions, then the directives of such parents are not in accordance with the will and commandment of the Lord, and the children should not obey them. Instead, they should remember the words of Christ. He who loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Indeed, it is right that children should obey their parents and honor them, for both the natural and written law prescribe this. How can the apostle say that honor thy father and mother is the first commandment? The first commandment of the Decalogue is, I am the Lord thy God, that thou shalt have no other gods beside me. And the first commandments mentioned by Christ in the Gospels are, thou shalt not kill, and thou shalt not commit adultery. And later he gives another commandment, honor thy father and thy mother. To this we reply that Paul did not say simply that it was the first commandment, but that it was the first commandment with a promise. Neither the first commandment of the Decalogue nor any other commandments offers promises or rewards from God. In none of the commandments did God promise to give rewards of good things to those who kept the commandments, with one exception. Honor thy father and thy mother, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest live long on the good land which the Lord thy God gives to thee. Permit me to add, as writes St. Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain, that according to the divine Chrysostom and the Holy Theophylact, the two commandments that immediately precede this one in the order in which the Lord pronounced them, thou shalt do no murder, and thou shalt not commit adultery, do not contain promises and rewards, but only the avoidance of evil, not the doing of good. For no reward is due to one who merely does no evil and fails to practice what is good. But this commandment, because it pertains to doing good, is the first commandment to be accompanied by a promise. Marvelous indeed is the order of the 10 Commandments. Moses, or rather God himself, first distanced mankind from evil deeds by means of the other commandments. Then he introduced them to doing of good deeds by giving them the first commandment, that children should honor their parents. Parents were the first after God to become benefactors of mankind, for they are the cause of human life and existence. Therefore, it is right that the parents should be the first to enjoy the fruits from their children, and in particular these 5 virtues: obedience, honor, love, gratitude, and patience in their failings in time of old age and weakness. As it is written in the book of Sirach, Son, help thy father in his old age, and grieve him not in his life. Verse 3, that it may be well with thee, and thou mayest live long on the earth. The apostle spoke only of these few simple words concerning the obedience of children to their parents. Because it is difficult for the young children to retain everything they hear, he also said a little about the obedience of children. Because the husband and wife, the parents of the children, had already been taught this and had regulated their children's behavior in accordance with the instructions given to them by Paul, therefore, such well-grounded parents need not exert much labor in lecturing in order to bring them to order. But he does not mention here that the children will inherit the kingdom of heaven and the good things to come of the age, the good things to come of the age to come, only if they are obedient and honor their parents. These words of Scripture are sufficient, and he told them only what the childish and immature soul loves to hear. What could be sweeter for young children than to be happy and to live a long life in this world? So also it is for the Jews, who were childish and immature, that God gave them only the law, for they were unable to hear and comprehend that which is lofty and perfect. In verse 4, and ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And the explanation, Paul did not need to say, love your children, for human nature itself demands this of parents, whether they are willing or not. Instead, he instructs the fathers not to provoke them to anger. This means, do not threaten or disinherit or disown them, but nor bear down on them so harshly as to treat them not as free human beings, but as slave children, and always grumbling and getting angry at them. With these words, the divine apostle elevates his teaching to the first principle and cause of the obedience of children, God himself. And he shows the parents how to make their children obedient. If you want your children to obey you, feed them with divine words and send them to school to learn the Holy Scriptures. Do not tell me that reading the Scriptures is only for priests and monks and nuns. Every Christian must do so, especially those living in the world, whose need is greater on account of the storms and confusion of carnal and secular life. It is to your advantage that your children should hear the words, honor thy father and thy mother. Therefore will you acquaint your child with vile pagan Greek writings, from which he will learn all that is the worst in man, or will you acquaint him with the words of God? Verse 5, servants, be obedient to them that are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, and in simplicity of your heart as to Christ. And the explanation here, because the virtue of the servants contributes much to the composition and establishment of the homes of the Christian families, Paul does not neglect this important aspect. He addresses them last because they hold the lowest rank. However, he does not condescend to them as children. He speaks to them as mature men, as we shall demonstrate shortly. They are your masters, according to the flesh, only for a short time on this earth. He immediately consoles them, showing them that the duration of their servitude is temporary. It will be dissolved together with the flesh. Concerning the wife, the apostle had stated simply in chapter 5, verse 33, that she reverence her husband. Now that he says it again with more intensity, the word trembling conveys an intensification of fear. The wife is equal in honor to her husband, and she is free. But the servants do not share the same honor that the wife has. Although even the servants are brothers and sisters in Christ, for he had directed above that all who are brothers and free men should submit themselves one to another in the fear of God. To submit and to serve another is not a dishonor to one's family and virtue. It is rather a sign of gentility and nobility. This is why he wrote to the Galatians that they should, by love, serve one another. However, there are many servants who submit to their masters, not out of love and willing disposition, but out of fear and a sense of compulsion. Hence, they secretly plot against their masters. This is why he adds the words, in simplicity of heart, instructing the servants not to act wickedly and deceitfully against their masters. And verses 6 and 7, not with eye service as men pleasures, but as the servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart with good will, doing the service as to the Lord and not to men. And the explanation, this means you servants should serve your masters not only when they are present and watching over you, but also in their absence. He who is a man-pleaser cannot be a servant of Christ. As Paul says in another place, if I yet pleased men, I should not be the servant of Christ. As he said in Galatians 1:10, it is possible for a servant to serve his master without guile and with simplicity of heart, and yet do so in a perfunctory manner, not utilizing all his power and strength. This is why the apostle adds the phrase from the heart, which means exerting all one's strength and zeal. But the servant should also perform his duties with good will, which means that he does so by his own free will and has not been forced. Thus, the ignobility of servitude is removed if the servants do what is good and willingly submit to their master's authority, having no fear of being forced and whipped into obedience. Doing the will of God means either that the servants should be obedient to their masters because it is the will of God that good order prevail among men, or that servants should submit to their masters only in regards to the deeds and service which God wills. Suppose that a master compels a servant to commit shameful acts of impiety, hateful to God. By no means should the servant obey him. He should resist the master and even choose to die, rather than commit a lawless and impious deed. Servants who serve their masters should understand that they are serving the Lord, not men. It is the Lord who accepts for himself the grateful disposition of the servants with which they serve their masters. Furthermore, the Lord gave the law and established good order among men. He ordained that masters should govern their servants, and that servants should be governed by their masters. Therefore, he does not serve his master as he should. He who does not serve his master as he should stands in opposition to divine law. And in verse 8, knowing that whatsoever good thing any man doeth, the same shall he receive of the Lord, whether he be bond or free. It is likely that there were many Greek masters, unbelievers, and pagans who treated their servants poorly and did not give them their promised wages. Therefore, Paul explains to the servants, even though you receive no reward from your earthly masters, you will surely receive your reward from God, the master of all. With these words, he demonstrates that he is addressing those servants who are mature in their knowledge of God and not immature children. To the children he promised above in verse 3, the reward of a long and happy life on earth, provided that they obey and honor their parents. To the servants he offers the reward of enjoyment of the good things in the age to come. And in verse 9, and ye masters do the same things unto them, forbearing threats, knowing that your master is in heaven. Neither is there respect of persons with him. And the explanation, and you, the masters, should do the same thing to your servants. What are they? That you should serve your servants, not to please men, but with fear and trembling to please God. Without saying it in so many words, this is what the apostle means. The master should serve his own servant by thinking about him, taking care of all of his needs, treating him with indulgence, and making allowance for his weaknesses. Listen now to what follows. Forbearing threats. Paul did not say to the masters, refrain from whipping the servants. He said, do not even threaten to do so. If the master must leave off making even a threat against the servants, how much more so should they give up punishments altogether? It is as if he were saying, you masters should not even give the appearance of bearing down harshly on your servants. Then it becomes completely unnecessary for you to get angry and to frighten them with chastisement. Take note, O reader, how the apostle instills fear in the earthly masters. With what measure ye judge, ye shall be judged, and with what measure ye meet, it shall be measured to you again. That is to say, in the same manner as you have treated your servant, so will God treat you. Hence, be careful, lest God say to you, I forgave thee all that debt. Shouldest not thou also have had compassion on thy fellow servant, even as I had pity on thee? Do not imagine, Paul warns, if you act harshly and cruelly to your servant as if he were a paltry and an insignificant person, that you yourself will not be examined harshly by God. Do not entertain such a notion. God is not a respecter of persons. For external laws are those which make distinctions between masters and servants, nobility and lowborn. They are the laws of mortal men. But it is not so with the laws of God. Even you, the master, is a servant of God, the master of both you and your servant. Therefore, if you act harshly and show no mercy to your fellow servant, know that you will be chastised by God, the master of all. God in the beginning did not make man to be servant of another. It was the greed of men, such as thieves and soldiers, and the arrogance and dishonor displayed to their parents, which made men slaves and prisoners. Although God did not introduce servitude in the beginning, he did decree obedience along with forgiveness and pardon. He ordained that men should submit to one another, to the lesser to the greater, for the establishing of good order in the world. Thus, the life of man would not be overwhelmed by incessant wars, bloodshed because men would not submit to one another. Holy cow, that was a long one.